I'm kidding, of course. I am, in fact, thrilled to be here, and I just want to acknowledge how fortunate I am to be joined today by two marvelous women, my partner, Martina Anderson, whom I met 30 years ago this fall on a college campus in Western Massachusetts, and my mother, Ann Seligsohn, who, along with my father, instilled in me the love of learning and the love of the world that explain how I ended up addressing you on this occasion. I'm thrilled to be here in order to reflect for just a few moments on some questions about the long stretch of your life that is ahead of you now that you are graduating. And it is indeed likely to be a long stretch. Life expectancies keep extending, especially for those with higher education. And with all the health sciences majors sitting in front of me, it seems inevitable that at least one of you will discover the medical miracle that will keep your generation alive forever. Either way, you have a pretty good shot at living 70 or 80 more years. So with perhaps 8 decades ahead of you, it's worth taking a few moments to contemplate how you might spend that time. Now, I recognize that you probably have a few things on your mind other than what you're likely to be doing 70 years down the road. But despite that, I'd like to suggest that commencement is a particularly good moment for this sort of reflection. Commencement is a ritual, and rituals are designed to take us outside the normal flow of time and experience. That's why we go to great lengths to make rituals look and feel different from ordinary activities. And to cite just one example, and it may shock you to learn this, I don't typically wear this outfit to work every day. Although I will say we all look pretty great in this getup, so I'm glad to be with you in this way. And while there are many reasons we have rituals, one is to give us the opportunity to step outside of our daily routine and reflect on things that matter a great deal, but that we often forget to think about. To get us started, I'm going to hazard a guess about what you have not forgotten to think about over your years in college, especially the last few months. My guess is that you have spent a fair amount of time thinking about what you will do during the part of each week spent at work. You have probably thought about what job you might want and what you needed to do in college to prepare yourself. That thinking might not always have been easy, and you might have changed your mind more than once, and you might still be changing your mind. And by the way, that's okay. I'm just guessing that career-related thinking has been some part of your college experience. For many of you, that thinking led you to choose professions that involve directly serving others. You will be teachers, physical therapists, occupational therapists, art therapists, athletic trainers, social workers, or professionals in fields that serve clients or patients. Your service to your clients, your patients, or your students will be based on the fact that in one crucial way, you are not like them. The person who seeks your services will be coming to you because you have expertise they lack. When it comes to the specific reason for your interaction with your patient or client or student, you and they are not equals. That does not mean, of course, that you are better than they are. As human beings, you are equal. But the service interaction is based on an inequality. Now, for those of you keeping score, you may remember that I said I was going to talk about something you might not have paused to think about. And since then, I have talked about your future professional lives, something you've probably thought a lot about. So I'll get back to that less thought of topic, but let's keep that observation about service and inequality tucked away for later use. I want to ask you today to think about the portion of each day and week outside of your paid occupation. For most of us, much of that time is spent in our roles as family people, as daughters and sons, sisters and brothers, partners and spouses, mothers and fathers, aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents. And many of us spend a lot of time thinking about those roles, about the families we have or want, and the obligations and possibilities in our roles. But that's also not what I want us to think about today. I want to ask you to reflect instead on the portion of your time you spend not being paid and not with your family, the time you spend as a member of a community. I mentioned earlier that many of you will spend your professional lives performing service to others. And when many people think about their lives as community members, they also think about performing service to others. They think specifically about community service as service to others, often service to those less fortunate, people facing homelessness, hunger, disease, or other challenges. As I see it, there are two problems with that way of thinking about your life as a community member. The first has to do with what I mentioned earlier. When we perform service to others, we put ourselves in a relationship of inequality. If our relationship begins on the basis of my having and your not having, that is a relationship of inequality. And while inequality is not out of place in a teacher-student relationship or a doctor-patient relationship, inequality does not really belong in the relationship between members of a community. It does no harm to my dignity to acknowledge that a doctor has specialized knowledge and skills that I lack. Indeed, that is why a doctor is paid for her efforts. But it does harm my dignity if a fellow member of my community approaches me not as an equal, but from a position of superiority. No one wants to be on the receiving end of condescension. In our identities as members of a community, we are all equal members. So if we are to act as members of a community, we need to find a way of doing so that doesn't reinforce relationships of inequality, but discovers and celebrates the possibilities for equality. The other problem with thinking of community service as service to others is that it tends to accept our big problems as a given, while leading us to treat the symptoms of those problems. Take the example of homelessness. Most volunteer opportunities to serve people experiencing homelessness involve taking actions to feed, clothe, or provide health care. These things are obviously important and worthy, but they do nothing to reduce the likelihood that the people being served will continue to be without homes. The main problem with homelessness is that you don't have a home, and yet most of the service people do for homeless people does not address that. So we need an approach to problems like homelessness that treats our fellow community members as equals and that moves past symptoms to treating underlying conditions. For me, a route to the answer begins with the words of the great African-American spiritual, "Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel?" Spirituals, of course, are the songs of the African-American slaves in the southern United States, songs that captured the deepest aspirations of a people suffering one of history's most extreme horrors. The song refers to the Old Testament story of Daniel, sentenced to a night in a lion's den for practicing his religion, but protected from the lions by God. The refrain of the spiritual consists of two rhetorical questions. Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? Why not every man? The first question, didn't my Lord deliver Daniel, reminds us of the restoration of one man's freedom. The second question, why not every man, reminds us of the continuing injustice done to millions of others. And as soon as we think at that level, we begin to see the direction we need to go. It is not sufficient to provide service to individuals facing conditions such as homelessness. That amounts to delivering Daniel alone. We must also ask what we can do to end homelessness. We must ask how we can change the communities in which we live so there are not people who have no place to live. Instead of serving others, approaching them as people who lack while we have, we need to serve our communities by making them the kinds of places consistent with our values. Whether you are experiencing homelessness or not, we can all agree that we would be a better community if no one were experiencing homelessness. As equals, together we seek to make our community the kind of community in which we want to live. Now that sounds nice, but it also sounds a bit daunting. I'm pretty confident I can help out at a soup kitchen or a shelter, but ending homelessness sounds like it might be above my pay grade. So let's pursue the example. If you wanted to end homelessness in your community, what would you do? Well, it turns out others have figured out some great answers to that question. The traditional approach to addressing homelessness has been to offer services to homeless people, trying to help get them to the point where they can earn a living and maintain a home. So people are offered job training, mental health services, addiction counseling, whatever fits their situation. But let's think about how well that's likely to work. Say you're a parent of young children. You work at a low-wage job, get sick, and lose that job. You can't pay rent, and you end up in a shelter. You're now living in crowded conditions, trying to take care of your children, help them with their homework, keep them from getting distracted by all the people around them in the shelter. How likely are you to be able to focus on a job search? How likely are you to be able to keep yourself healthy in a place where a good night's sleep can be hard to come by? How likely are you to be able to make yourself presentable for a job interview? Or imagine you're a person whose homelessness results from mental illness resulting from trauma, which is the case for many homeless individuals, including many homeless veterans. How likely are you to be able to restore yourself to mental health when you are living with little privacy among many other people struggling with their own mental illnesses and addictions? What are the chances you will get yourself to the point where you can find and hold a job and move to independence? The solution, now that others have figured it out, seems obvious. It's an approach called housing first, and it's pretty much what it sounds like. Start by giving homeless people homes, then help them deal with the issues that cause them to be without homes. Not surprisingly, it works. Communities that have adopted housing first have dramatically reduced their rates of homelessness. Instead of offering services in environments where they are destined to fail, those communities now offer services in environments where they are likely to succeed. And once you know that, you start to see what you as a community member can do to serve your community. First of all, find out whether your community is a housing first community. If it isn't, find other people who care about the issue and educate local government officials. Connect with organizations working to end homelessness to get the information you need. Show up to public meetings. Work toward changing the policy in your community. If the public officials you have don't seem interested, maybe one day you will even need to run for office yourself. Now, some of you might have noticed what I just did. I moved us from the realm of community service to the realm of democratic participation in politics, and that is no accident. The greatest American philosopher, John Dewey, said, "Democracy is the idea of community life itself." That might sound strange to our ears. Dewey's point was that a community is a group of equals who share a place. If equals share a place, they need a way of making decisions about their shared place. And that is all democracy is, a system for making decisions about the community. If you do not participate in democracy, if you do not participate in making decisions about your community, you leave it to others. And in so doing, you're undermining the very idea of community by leaving your voice out of shared decision-making. And if you care about people whose life circumstances make it harder for them to have an effective voice than it is for you, you are leaving those people in the wind. The good news is that many of us find great satisfaction in serving our community. We connect with others who, like we do, care about living in communities where everyone can thrive. We find that we often have much in common, even with people whose views about how to get there are very different from our own. Aristotle called human beings the zoon politikon, the political animal, because the only thing that distinguishes us from every other species is our ability to make decisions together about how we will live. And that quintessentially human activity can be deeply satisfying. To be clear, none of this means that you should not work to meet the immediate needs of members of your community. The point is that doing so is not the end of the story. It is instead the beginning. It is about helping people to take their rightful place as community members with an equal voice in shaping the direction of your community. It is not about serving others. It is about making common cause with your fellow community members in order to serve your community. So I leave you with this. When you are thinking of how to spend your time as a community member, just remember to ask yourself not only, didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? Ask yourself also, why not every man? To the members of the Springfield College class of 2015, I thank you for your attention. I congratulate you on completing this important stage in your education, and I wish you the very best of luck. Thank you.